They mainly just made the ship look nicer and the plants look nicer and that kind of stuff.
Yeah, everything's a little
Well,
sharper.
I mean, you didn't want Captain Pike like digitally inserted into other episodes or something.
No, that's okay.
I mean,
that's all right. This episode was written by, of course, Gene Roddenberry gets writing credit, as well as Jerome Bixby, who wrote, besides a few other episodes of Star Trek, also wrote the movie Fantastic Voyage, which is a personal favorite of mine. I really enjoy that movie. And Twilight Zone, the movie. So he's been in and around sci-fi and fantasy. And directed by Mark Daniels, who I went through his IMDb page, and if you watched any shows that aired from the 60s to the 80s, you have probably seen an episode directed by Mark Daniels. He's directed everything, which was cool to see. The synopsis for this episode is: a transporter accident places Captain Kirk's landing party in an alternate universe where the Enterprise is in the service of a barbarically brutal empire. The cast is, of course, William Shatner as Captain Kirk, Leonard Nimoy as Spock, DeForest Kelley as Bones, James Doohan as Scotty, George Takei as Sulu, Nichelle Nichols as Uhura, Walter Koenig as Chekhov. And then I couldn't help but remember how when we were in Chicago earlier this year, we got to see and hear Walter Koenig and George Takei speak at some pretty cool panels, which was such a treat. Yeah, such a treat. I missed the Shatner one. Did you go to that one, Neil?
No, I missed that one too, kind of on purpose.
Oh, okay. I came in at the last 10 minutes when he was doing Q&A. Yeah, I was more interested to hear George Takei and Walter Koenig.
I did see him. I did see him in a Q&A not very long after I moved up here, before I really heard about hijinks of his around here and how, can I say diva-ish she is?
You can definitely say that.
You can definitely say that Shatner's a diva.
Gonna unfollow me now. Oh wait, he doesn't follow me. And I mean, he was funny. It was like, I mean, I didn't get to see Walter, but I saw George. I saw his, and it was like, like telling stories and then getting some questions, and except for he didn't do as good of a job with the guy, that comes up and is like, I want to be an actor, so can you tell me exactly how I go about doing that? Those people. He wasn't, he let him talk the whole way, and then sort of tried to give him an answer, and I'm like, no, just say, look it up on the internet or something. I don't know. Take an acting class.
That's funny.
You're bothering me, kid. Get out of here. Something else.
Man. Let's see. And then the only other two people in the cast I wanted to mention, two guest stars, Barbara Luna as Marlena, and John Winston as Lieutenant Kyle. He was
Love Kyle.
Oh, God, I love Lieutenant Kyle. He was a recurring background character who would sometimes have a couple of lines here and there, but he always had the most epic hairdo. And he had a great accent. Lieutenant Kyle. He would show up from time to time, and he's in this episode as well. Things don't go so great for him, but he's in this episode. So
does have a red shirt.
Well, that is true. A lot of people wearing those sort of crewman uniforms, like the jumpsuits with the belts. That was a lot in this episode too. I was like, okay, that's interesting choice of uniform, but all right.
And because I didn't think about it 2 weeks ago or whatever, I didn't think about it, even though I've seen this, that in yesterday's Enterprise, whenever they're in the alternate future or whatever, they have on like gold belts and it's like sort of a nod to that.
Yeah,
to this episode, in that episode.
Yeah, like a real
and everybody,
belt.
and they're in war, and everybody's on edge and more barbaric and angry and everything, kind of thing. Because they're like, it's this war.
Yeah.
So yeah, it was. Yeah, I like seeing some of those similarities. Some similarities. Can I speak today? I'm trying.
Yeah, there's definitely a similarity between the costumes we see in this one and in yesterday's Enterprise, and definitely that kind of same idea of like that. When we get into it, how like this Federation, which calls themselves like the Empire,
Yeah.
they're, I mean, they're not really particularly at war with anybody, but I mean, they're pretty much have been set up, and this is certainly pre-Star Wars, but they are set up as like the Empire in the Star Wars universe, which is, where they're like controlling systems and planets through terror, which is how the Empire functioned. And then certainly if you go fast forward to Deep Space Nine, they did a lot of stuff with the mirror universe and kind of the idea of this rebellion that would pop up and try to fight against this evil empire. So it is very interesting similarities between the two universes here.
Yeah, and when they blew up Alderaan, it was terrible.
Yes.
I guess the thing that George Lucas took is actually like, yeah, they're gonna actually blow it up. We're not gonna just go back to where they came from and then not know what happened.
Yeah. Now here in this episode, they almost blow up a planet, but not quite. So we're gonna. That might be where the similarities end. But so this episode starts out really interesting. Kirk, Uhura, Bones, Scotty, they're on a planet. They are talking to the Halkin Council. They're trying to negotiate rights to mine dilithium crystals on this planet.
This episode just started right up, and I was like, do I need to go back and watch the one before this?
I know.
It just seemed like they were in the middle of a conversation. I'm like, I was not ready for that.
It really kind of just starts. Like, you are seriously in the middle of what looks like another episode, and you're like, wait, did I miss something here? There's very little setup when the episode first starts. And then we do get like a lot of exposition all at once about how like this is an incredibly peaceful race of people. They are afraid to let anybody like they basically are like, if anything that we would do or supply or participate in would result in even the death of one person, like it's devastating to us. And I thought this was a very interesting thing because he even says that they would rather die as a race than be party to any kind of violence. And I just thought, like, how have these people lasted this long with this attitude? Like, I mean, how come they haven't been taken over and conquered? I mean, maybe they have been, but like, how have they never been conquered and taken over by like every random person that showed up? It was very, I found that to be a little odd.
It's definitely a pretty idealistic 60s era theme, though.
Mm-hmm. Oh, yeah. 100%. What's interesting is that Kirk, says to them, hey, we've shown you proof that the Federation is only interested in peaceful missions. And their point is like, yeah, well, that's now, but that doesn't mean in the future you may not become malevolent. And there's definitely some foreshadowing here, for what's about to come. And what's interesting is, like, in this opening scene, they are, like, literally negotiating for, like, rights to do business on their planet, which is something we saw a lot of in the 60s original series, sort of like the business side of the Federation. But, like, going forward in other series, we didn't always see that. They still kind of talk about money sometimes here, and they talk about, paying bills and stuff, and they didn't, going forward, really never hear that. But I thought that it was interesting here that they're really just like negotiating for rights to mine dilithium crystals on this planet.
Yeah, And I think it was a kind of just a constant evolution of the Federation that maybe, in universe is why you don't hear about it as much in later series. This is near to the beginning of the Federation, so they were still maybe using monetary stuff occasionally. Because I know, like in Enterprise, there was a lot more dealing with money and whatnot when the Federation was just being established. So that kind of tied it together a little bit for me.
Yeah, for sure. So there, so basically, then we get like lots of thunder on this planet. Kirk calls the Enterprise. Spock says, "Well, this is just regular ion storm," and they're going to beam back up. And the Halkin Council says, "Well, we'll meditate on your proposal." And then he says, to Kirk, "You could just take the crystals from us by force." And Kirk says, a little smugly, I might add, "But we won't. Think about that." Like, it's very that guy,
Yeah, it is very that guy.
Yeah. Kirk's a lot that guy in this episode, and we'll talk about that too.
Weird. It's so weird that that he used to get on my nerves, because that's totally like that sort of who I kind of went for before. Anyway, that's why none of those relationships worked out. Sorry.
Hey, listen, we all have a type. It's okay. It's okay.
I mean, I have lots of types. It's just I end up with certain types more often.
So,
anyway.
Let's see. So they start to beam up, but there's problems right away. They kind of start to materialize, then they lose them. They start to materialize, so they try again, and now they don't quite materialize. And then we see, I love this effect, we see the Enterprise, you know where I'm going with this, Neil. We see the Enterprise in orbit going one way, and then it's like, flip, 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 and then it's going the other way, and it's like, it's a switcheroo, oh no!
It's effective, but simple.
It is. So now you know this is not our Enterprise, everybody. It's going the other way now.
It's just like they flipped the film instead of like even recording it from the other way.
It totally did.
Yeah. So,
I mean, I appreciate all of these 60s effects. I love like Doctor Who and the old ones and everything. So I get it.
Yeah, it's I love it. I love the 60s effects. It's great. So they do finally materialize, but now like everything's different. We see the crew that's standing in the transporter room. They're doing this sort of quasi Nazi salute. Like they like pound their chest and then stick their arm out, and then of course we see the big reveal. Spock has a beard? What? But,
okay,
that's
with
how
the Nazi
he's
salute
evil.
thing. Sorry, yes. With the Nazi salute thing, when you see a little bit later, you see Kirk do it, and he's just sort of half-heartedly does it, and it's like, was he just playing it like that?
I think
or
so.
Was it that William Shatner was like, oh, a little too much for me?
I would bet the former rather than the latter.
Yeah, kind of. I wasn't going to say that because I've already said terrible things about him. I mean, I've already alluded to terrible things about him.
No, I think that's definitely a Captain Kirk thing over a Shatner thing. But, so Spock asks about the mission. Kirk's like, there's no change. So Spock says, should we follow standard procedure? And Kirk's like, yes? Sure, let's do that. And then Spock is like, all right, prepare to phaser barrage the city and destroy every living thing in it. And it's like, oh, okay, well, let's, that's not good. We then,
I was just laughing.
Oh, sorry, I thought you wanted to say something. And then Spock berates Lieutenant Kyle for the transporter malfunction. Poor Kyle tries to defend himself. Spock's like, "Give me your agonizing